I recently did a couple videos on Cena Grace and Tanishi Coates and kind of how they take a lot of hits for their runs on Captain America and on Iceman, but that there's more going on than just the two of them. That their books they took over were not exactly in the best state, and that were they in a position where it was impossible for them to succeed. I'd like to talk more about that. Hey everybody, this is Perch. You've heard the comment, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, with comics, it kind of takes a village to ruin a comic in a lot of cases. Um, there are some very well known comics and creators that have taken a ton of hits, whether it's people disliking Tom King's Batman run, or Byron Minkle Bendis' Superman run, or what Cena Grace did on Iceman, or Ta-Nehisi Coates did on Captain America, and they take the brunt of the criticism. Something that's interesting is that when there's bad art in a comic, art that people don't like, they tend to take the panel, not the whole work, not like you know, here are 12 pages of this artist, and here's why. Consistently, it's bad. They'll take one panel, like there's the picture in and it's a decent artist, but it wasn't Mike Del Mundo, or maybe it was. Anyway, I think it was in a Doctor Strange. No, it was it doesn't matter. Anyway, Frank, Irving, I think it was Irving who did the Doctor Strange Spider-Man bit, and Spider-Man's got the weirdest kind of sideways crazy mouth that you've ever seen. And people took that one panel and they posted all over social media like, "What the hell is this trash art?" And they didn't show kind of the other parts of Irving's work, which is, I mean, he's a pretty incredible artist. It was a weird panel, and it was a weird panel. No, make no mistake about it. It looked strange. But with artists, they tend to take a single panel and they'll post it up, like that one in I think it was That Girl, where the bathtub was in front of a door for no apparent reason, and there's just the weird stuff that goes on. And sometimes it's hard to tell if the artist is to put in an Easter egg, or if the artist maybe is behind on schedule and trying to just slam out this page for $125 to get it off, or maybe they're took on the inking and the coloring as well. I mean, who knows what's going on? There's always something like that. But artists get ripped for panels. Writers, on the other hand, get ripped for kind of the run, like the Bendis run or the Tom King Batman run. So they don't actually go in and pick out specific stories or pick out particular moments. They tend to just kind of, as an umbrella statement, the whole run. And it's just an interesting difference. I'm not saying one is right over the other, but in both cases, I think they miss a few things. In the artist case, I think it's obvious. There's 22 pages in this comic. There's one weird panel. Maybe there's 21 decent pages and one bad one. Who knows? But it's there's an easy way to see that there's a bigger world out there to the comic than just the one panel that we're making fun of. By the way, I'm not suggesting people stop making fun of panels. I mean, one of the fun things you can do about comics is to pull out a single panel and go, "What the hell is this?" And actually, back in the '80s, or maybe it was early '90s, I think it was the late '80s though, back when Peter David had kind of just started doing his "But I Digress" column. Every now and then, there'd people within those comic book resources, I think, comic book news. Anyway, they would pull out a panel, or during a convention or during a show, they'd like, "Look at this crazy piece of artwork," and it was not. It was something everybody could kind of laugh at together. It wasn't seen as this horror show that kind of a lot of art critique gives us today. But by contrast, the with writers, it is again, it's that all or nothing, and that one's a little harder to show, because the reality is, if you sit somebody down and you look at it, the Tom King run on Batman, the first several issues were actually fairly well received. That monster invasion, the Monster Night, or whatever it is, with Hugo Strange, that was a pretty mixed bag to a lot of people. And then we got into some of the Bane stuff, and we got into the slow build up to the wedding. We had the War of Jokes and Riddles, which lost a few people. And then we go from there into kind of the Batman Depresso zone after the wedding that didn't happen. And so that was the kind of the crazy time. But it's important to recognize, and I think this is the point I was trying to make with Cena Grace and Ta-Nehisi Coates, It's more than just them. I mean, they're submitting a script, they're submitting a pitch. It's going in front of an editor. It's going before probably a few people. It's going with the editor, probably the head editor. I'm sure Tom Brevoort or a Joe Quesada is looking at some of this stuff. We knew that CB Cebulski was helping Coates with Captain America. We know that other people besides just Jordan White was involved in Cena Grace's run. I want to say Jordan White. I think that was Jordan White at that point, and not. But anyway, there are more people, and in a lot of cases, these writers' summits where they have a lot of writers, editors, and people in a room, and they're kind of discussing their storyline ideas. It's collaborative. And so it's just important for us to remember as fans that when we're saying, hey, this Coates Captain America is terrible. He doesn't understand Captain America. He doesn't understand it. It's actually bigger than that. There's a lot of people, you could argue, that do not understand Captain America. And keep in mind this: we went from Nick Spencer to Mark Waid to Coates on Captain America, and in each one, the Mark Waid run was probably the one that people liked the best. But even there, it was kind of the first couple issues people liked, and then it went into a weird kind of side drain that people weren't as fond of. And what's consistent? Well, the editorial staff is pretty consistent. The management of Marvel is pretty consistent, that approved all of these pitches, that approved this whole thing to go forward. The writers changed completely different writer, everything else, but the company solicited a pitch. The company recommended this is the direction it goes. And so the question becomes, does Ta-Nehisi Coates, does he understand Captain America any less than, say, Nick Spencer? They both had pretty reviled runs on that comic. Was one better than the other or worse than the other? Were they both bad? And why is it that we don't hold editorial more to the fire? Because again, they're the ones who are both soliciting these pitches. They're the ones who are shaping them. They're the ones who are kind of saying, no, step back a little bit. I mean, a good example is if you go look at Civil War by Mark Millar, and you buy the director's cut version of that, and you see Brevoort, and you see Joe Quesada, and a couple other people are in there giving suggestions, helping shape the story, and they're shaping it a lot. Keep in mind, Millar is a pretty big author at this point. He's an established big seller. He's somebody who Marvel definitely trusts as a major part to their company, and yet they're still editing the hell out of his story. They're making major changes, sometimes for the better, sometimes not. Mark Millar wanted to actually had the whole World War Hulk storyline in Civil War. He wanted that to collide and be part of it. And Quesada talked him out of it, which is probably a good idea. I think that would have been too much unless they were really going to expand the amount of issues Civil War had. But that was going to make that whole thing very, very convoluted. But keep in mind, that was a big part of Millar's pitch, and that was removed. That was changed. So as we talk about some of these creators doing runs that we hate, or runs that just fail, or runs that seemingly do not get the character at all, that just are completely kind of out of left field, we have to recognize that it's more than just the writer that deserves some criticism. It's, in fact, in many cases, the writer may be one of the least people involved. The writer's setting up the pacing, the story. Think of them like a director for a movie. They're kind of describing kind of the different beats and how the emotions are going to play and everything else. The overall kind of production or story has a lot more people into it than the writer. And I think I just wanted to throw that out there, something to keep in mind, because it's very easy to kind of lay the blame for Batman and that whole thing on Tom King. Certainly can, but it's a lot more than just Tom King that was involved in that thing. And so we can put all the arrows at King, and I'm not saying he's independent of criticism by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a bigger story than that. And we need to keep that in mind, because otherwise we're yelling at one thing while we're letting something else kind of run completely amok over another part. But what about you? What do you think? Who all do you think needs to be involved in this thing? As we look at a complete picture of where comics go wrong, what other factors should we consider? Let me know in the comments below. Hey, like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter or Facebook at Comic Perch. But most importantly, thanks for listening.